Our next taster talk is from Mary Wilson. Mary is principal of Beverstock Oaks School here in Auckland. It's a year 1 to 6 school. It opened in February 2005 and it's grown from 59 students to 800 students. The community comprises more than 50 different ethnicities and offers rich learning for all involved. So to talk about beyond tolerance, celebrating and respecting diversity through the development of deep mutual understanding, please welcome Mary Wilson. As Michelle said, our community is a melting pot, all clustered together in a newly subdivided valley. 57 nationalities are represented in our family, and a number of years ago we were investigating what makes me who I am, my culture, the traditions, what makes you you. Where are our connections and where are our differences that we can learn from one another? During this inquiry, our staff, our students and their parents were encouraged to share their stories. And at the end of the term, we had an open evening to share the learning. The school was alive with static displays, live displays and people moving through. And, you know, as the principal, you wander through the Awhina spaces and through the courtyards and you bump into people. A conversation that I was called into by a dad I will take to my grave. He stopped me as I walked through an Awhina space and he said, "Mary, I don't know that you'll ever fully understand the impact that the learning our daughter has done this term has had on her and our family." I was all ears. He said, "Our daughter is the only one in our family that was born here in New Zealand, and she proudly says I'm a Kiwi. Whenever our family have traditional cultural ceremonies and celebrations, she always sits on the periphery. She doesn't fully engage. She doesn't understand the richness of her biculturalism. She's embarrassed because our country is often seen in the media through the lens of the atrocities of war." I stood there aghast. I listened further to the stories he told me that had been unearthed in his daughter through that term, and how she was on this journey of discovery to now engage in her rich biculturalism. By the time the father had finished telling me his story, the tears were rolling down my face. They just about are now, and just even thinking about it, and they were running down his face as well. What it led me to think, and I shared with the teacher of this child, who needs an assessment task to figure out this child has had some lifelong learning? What it got us thinking as a leadership team on this journey, where you have to be real and a learner every day, how do we develop this level of openness across our school and our community? How do we get them to open up to us like that father did? What we've learned throughout this is there is no such thing as a quick fix, that this stuff takes time, and that it starts with us because we have to be real every day. There have been many, many times that compromise has been hard to find, but as the global village expands, I believe our story is not just a New Zealand story. It's a global story. There's us asking ourselves that question. Here's the family.
Tonight I am feeling for you under the state of a strange land. a sacrifice much to be here. Therefore the graces I offer my hand. Welcome home. I bid you welcome. I bid you welcome. Welcome home. From the bottom of my heart. Welcome home. And out here on the edge, the empire is fading by the day, and the world is so weary and more, and maybe we'll find that new way. So welcome home. See, I made a space for you now. Welcome home. From the bottom of our hearts. Welcome home. From the bottom of our hearts. Whoa. Keep it coming now. Keep it coming now. You'll find most of us here with our hearts wide.
The school was developed in 2005. We opened with 59 students and phase 1 of the building. Within 4 years, we were 862 and had the stretch marks to prove it. The ministry were about a year behind with every phase. So if you're a new school now and you built in 2 stages or 1, it was through our battles. We had 4. We were formed very strongly in the first year around a shared vision. It was written by all the voices that were heard by our teachers, our students, our parents. I had no votes in that process, and it was the best gift of all. It's not about me, it's about us. Our population is really high ESOL. In fact, over 50% of our students are ESOL, and they come from all 4 corners of the world. We started with 12 different cultures. As I said before, we have 57 now. We have a very high level of special learning needs because they're often masked by the complexities of culture and language and not unearthed for some time. Our teachers really need a strong content and pedagogical knowledge, but by crikey, they've got to have thick skins and be resilient, because every day is a learning day and often traditional methods don't work. It's vital to be non-judgmental. And you need to have a distinct appreciation of the uniqueness of every single human being that you engage with. You've got to be open to learning on a daily basis. And I listen to the learning that's happened throughout this conference, and I think back to a very early time being a very strong believer in going to school camp, where we wanted to take our Sikh boys to camp and learning how bad I was at tying a Sikh turban. But the boys were very patient and the mothers were very patient, and a number of weeks later we got an okay one, but never as good as Mum could tie. In establishing our learning community, we've created more questions than answers. We've really asked ourselves lots of questions around how do we deeply connect with this community? And boy, we failed at the beginning in many different ways. We kept trying to use what was best practice in New Zealand schools, and it didn't work. So eventually, being the slow learners we are, we went out and we engaged with our community and asked them, what do you need from us? How can we form a working partnership with you? And they were all so busy trying to establish themselves in this new country, in this new life, that it was really hard to slow them down long enough to engage with us. We learned that really hard lesson of slower is definitely faster. In engaging with our families around this, we then ask them, well, we believe home learning and school learning can complement one another. We'd had quite interesting debates as a staff around what home work could look like, and many of them were quite challenged about some of the thoughts of us around that. We believe many school systems have it wrong. Parents and the family are the primary educator of the child. What right do we have as schools to continually steal time from families sending home repetitive exercises? We engaged with our cultures to find out their differing ideas, and many of them wanted that stuff, and others didn't. So we've had to build deep understandings with one another to engage and build trust to get it just right. We've had some challenging conversations around our separate and shared roles in nurturing the whole child. You know, there have been many times with parents who are agitated and at times aggressive, where as a principal you can feel your defensiveness rising. But we've learned the hard way to listen, to turn off Mr. Fix-It, and ask true inquiry questions in a very calm way, and often through an interpreter. The overarching message we try to get across is, hey, we may not agree right at this moment. We haven't found a point of understanding yet, but be aware we're on the same team. We want the best outcome for your child. One of the biggest, hairiest lessons we've learned is the one about assumptions. You know, you've heard that thing, assumptions make an ass out of you and me. Well, we've had to learn to voice our assumptions. We've had to learn to unearth those. But the most valuable lesson we've had to learn was to shut our mouths and engage our ears and truly listen to the stories. When we formed our shared vision, we unearthed 6 core values that we agreed to live by. We agreed to live them on a daily basis to get us to that place of Shangri-La that we'd identified. We put them in newsletters, we put them in posters on the wall, we talked about them. However, after a year, they hadn't stuck. So as we start every year on retreat with our staff, we decided to unpack them as staff and then take them back to the children and unpack them one at a time with our children, 5 weeks on one, and get some rich conversation going. We gained a shared meaning, but I got a story one day on crossing duty that made me realise they were going beyond the school gate. A parent said to me, "Mary, thank you for the conversations we're having in our family now." "Please tell me more," I said. "Our children, all 3, come home and are bubbling to tell us what they've talked about today around this core value. And all 3 of them tell the story, so much so they've called us back to the dining room table to have our dinner when we'd got so busy we were having it on the run." And as they unpack what they've learned and what they've talked about, it's fantastic that our 7-year-old blew us away the other night. He turned around and looked at my husband and I and said, "We value a sense of family and learning partnerships at school. What does that mean in our home?" What we have come to see is that we are part of a wider community. And what we've had to ask ourselves is, how do we perform as a positive, caring community citizen? I'd really like to unpack how we do that this afternoon, and I look forward to many of you travelling that with me. Thank you.